Great. Okay, so yeah, welcome to the end of week 3. I hope you guys are all doing well. So we're in the thick of the French Revolution. We're actually kind of coming out of it with these documents. And so what I want to do is talk about a couple of important documents relating to the phenomenon of the French Revolution and why it's such an important thing. And then we'll talk a little bit about things to come at the end here. I don't think we're going to be here super long, probably 20, 30 minutes at the most. So we've only got 2 documents and they're pretty short. So, okay. So first of all, when reading the first one about Edmund Burke, a little bit of background on him, was a British statesman. He's a member of Parliament in the British government. And he's one of the founding fathers, I suppose, if you want to say that, of conservatism. Like, he's one of the OG conservatives. And conservatism is a reactionary movement that is trying to keep things the same, or at least slow down the march of change in a policy way towards other things. So like in the United States, we talk a lot about liberals versus conservatives, and those two things are synonymous with Democrats and Republicans. And in reality, the United States is the only country that does that, because our political system is weird and dumb, and we don't really know what we're talking about. So a liberal, and we've talked about this before in past weeks, a liberal is somebody who believes in individual liberties. Liberalism is kind of synonymous with like libertarian. So individual freedoms, rights, liberties. And that doesn't quite map onto like Democratic Party anything, or Republican, right? Because Republicans, for instance, believe that, in free markets, they have, the Republicans believe in, maximizing individual rights in some ways. For instance, like Second Amendment rights. Whereas, Democrats also believe in maximizing individual liberties when it comes to things like reproductive rights and abortion. So, and both parties in the United States are both liberal in the traditional sense and also conservative in the other sense too. So when we talk about liberal and conservatism, like, do not think about Republicans and Democrats, because like it doesn't work. It doesn't work well mapping those values onto the American political system. So just throw those preconceptions out the window. Burke is one of the founders of conservatism. And conservatism started with people looking at the French Revolution and being like, holy shit, this is going off the rails. The French Revolution is going crazy. Like, they want to get rid of their king. You can't just do that. They want to tear down like the pillars of society, which is, the nobility and the Catholic Church. They want to throw all those things out the window. They're renaming the months and they're changing time and all this. And Burke is looking at this with horror, and he's going, France is devolving into chaos. Like, they think they're getting more freedom, but they're actually just devolving into chaos. Burke says you need some pillars of tradition to uphold society. Otherwise, it all falls apart. So conservatism, in Burke's view, it's a reactionary movement against the excesses of the French Revolution. And that's where we get kind of modern conservatism. Like, hey, let's pump the brakes on change, okay? If we're going to change things at all, it's got to be really gradual and careful and slow, because the status quo is very important, and it helps keep it's the like conservatism believes that tradition is the glue that keeps society together. And if you're going to change stuff, you better do it carefully. So that's all pretext to what this document is about. Because I know Thomas Burke or Edmund Burke is kind of hard to read. Like I'm sure some of you had difficulty reading this document, and that's okay. So what are some of Burke's, I kind of just laid out the first question there, but what are some of Burke's criticisms of the French Revolution in particular? Like, what does he say in this document? Anybody, feel free to talk about this. What is Burke saying in here? Because here he's railing against the French Revolution. Does anyone want to take a stab at it? If not, that's okay. It's a very hard document to get through. So basically what Burke is saying is he's warning the people of England not to follow the French example. Right on page 668 of your book, you know, so France has been a leader in Western civilization for a really long time. Like we meme France now, you know, like they're a bunch of frog leg eating, cheese munching, surrender monkeys. But that's a very modern view of France. Before the French Revolution, France was the most powerful country in Europe and in the West. They were the leaders in fashion and art, and they still kind of are, cuisine, things like that. So France is leading the West in a lot of different ways. They set the tone. What Burke is afraid of is with this revolution that's happened first in America and now in France, where people are getting rid of their kings and setting up their own governments, Burke is worried that this is setting a new trend towards anarchy and revolution. Like people tearing down the pillars of society is going to bring the whole house down on them instead of renovating the house to make it something better, right? What do you guys think of that? Like, do you think the French Revolution was a terrible thing where it was all anarchy, or did it actually work?
I actually don't think it really worked at all because there'd be a follow-up of multiple revolutions. And I think I actually I talked to you about this earlier, like in a previous meeting, but like the difference between the French Revolution and the American Revolution is that the American Revolution really only changed a few things, you know what I mean? Mainly with
Right.
like government and stuff like that, but all of the other stuff was just the same as England. Meanwhile, the French, they changed everything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So there's no really. So it was I would believe it was much weaker than the Americans.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good point. Does anyone else have any other thoughts on like, was the French Revolution an actual like bad, terrible thing, or did it do what it set out to do?
I don't think it did neither. I think it was like necessary because I think it kind of showed us like when the power is fully in the hands of the people and there's no real one voice or government or anything, people are going to do what's in their best interest. So I think it more than anything probably I mean, it definitely scared the monarchs in Europe, but I think it also kind of showed a lot of citizens in Europe, like, hey, we do need these people. Like, we need change, but we don't need to, start chopping people's heads off.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, good. Both very valid views. But it's kind of a spoiler, but one of the questions in your And one of the questions in the exam is going to ask you, was the French Revolution a successful thing or did it backfire? And it's completely up to you to answer that however you wish, but that's why we're talking about it now, is to start thinking about these things.
I remember the one thing that kind of, now that I think about, is that, like it said, like a lot of times I think they took the property of nobles. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, I mean, I can understand nobles maybe, but I guess the one thing, scary thing about that is that, like, you're basically taking property from someone else to give it to someone else. You know what I mean? That just seems really scary, if you understand what I mean.
Yeah.
The government that's able to take your property, you know, that does not sound like a very good government.
Yeah. So the blue, white, red in the French flag that comes out of this, like the French flag today is red, white, and blue. And that kind of flag started in the French Revolution. And those three colors, I'm trying to remember what the other two stand for. It's like liberty, equality, and property or something. But one of them is property. And so in the new French Republic, in the Constitution, they write into it the right to property, which is great if you're like a peasant and you don't have any. Then you're like, okay, great. That means I can try and get mine. But if you're a nobleman and a peasant mob comes and like steals your stuff and kicks you out of your house, and they're like, this is ours now. Where is your right to property? Like, so much for the equality part of this whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
So there are contradictions within the French Revolution. That's like, wait a minute, you know. And Burke is one of the most eloquent writers at the time to point that out. And he's like, wait a minute. You say you have a right to property for everybody, but then you're taking lands from the rich people and from the Catholic Church. Doesn't anyone see the contradiction in this? Like, don't we see the problem? If you want to create a fair society, it's got to be fair. It can't just be chaos, right? So that's partly what Burke is trying to say in here. And there's a few different lines that you can pick out from that. I don't have the book where I've like underlined this stuff, but you know, he's trying to say, look, in the Age of Enlightenment, we talked about all kinds of lofty ideals, equality being one of them. And Burke is like, yeah, equality, fine, I love it, but not at the expense of blowing up society altogether. You know, if you have to like cut people's heads off in the streets of Paris to accomplish equality, then I have bad news for you. You know, you're not getting equality. So that's basically what Burke is trying to say. Moving on then to Thomas Paine, because Thomas Paine is like he's taking the opposite kind of perspective of Burke on this. He's a cheerleader for the French Revolution. Now he's an American and he wrote all kinds of cool stuff in support of the American Revolution. So perhaps it's not a surprise that Thomas Paine finds himself pro-revolution. But so what are some of the criticisms that he makes of Burke's conservative point of view? What is Thomas Paine trying to say in this part of the document?
More or less just that, yeah, like change, you know, like you can't change everything at once, but that doesn't mean that, you know, there aren't things that have to be changed quickly. I think that's kind of what Paine was getting at. I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anybody have anything else to add to Nick? Because you're right. So specifically, in the Burke document, he complains about the king, there not being a king. He's like, without a king, how can a society actually prosper? Because we've always had kings. Like, kings have been around for literally since the beginning of human civilization, right? Like, think of the first societies ever. The Egyptians, they had kings. They're called pharaohs. Hammurabi of Babylon was a king. You need these great leaders to tell everyone below them what to do. Otherwise, society doesn't know what to do.
I actually have a historical counter argument for that.
Oh, okay, yeah, go ahead.
The Roman Republic.
Right. Well, Burke would say, before the Romans had a republic, they had kings. And yeah, they had like a couple hundred years of this republic, which worked out pretty well. But then it fell apart, and guess what they got? Emperors. Like they reverted back to that whole king model.
Yep, that's a good argument.
Well, I mean, it's not. It's actually not a good argument.
No, I mean,
that's what Burke would say.
Burke's argument works if you have like, I don't know, like a Constantine or like, I don't know, even like a Julius or like a Napoleon, like great leaders. But it doesn't work if you have a King Louis the 14th or this, it doesn't work if you have somebody with no idea what they're doing.
Yeah, right. Sometimes you're going to get shitty kings. And in that case, it's not better for society to have this crazy person at the top who doesn't know what they're doing. Then you start getting bad things that happen, right? The rest of society feels that pain of having incompetent leaders. So what Paine says in reaction to this, Thomas Paine says, I want you, Edmund Burke, to tell me what's so great about having a king. What function do they actually serve that cannot also be served by just having laws and a constitution, like what we have in the United States? That's basically his kind of shot back to Burke. He's like, look, kings, like exactly what Nick said. Kings can be great, fine, but when they're not great, then the whole country suffers. Why not let more people have a say in what goes on in the country? Why not have a legislature? Why not have, a balance of power between the different parts of government, like what America is trying to do? And, he kind of gets a little snippy with Burke in this. Like in the very last paragraph, Thomas Paine's an excellent writer, by the way, and he gets really sarcastic. He's like, if there's anything in monarchy which we people of America do not understand, I wish Mr. Burke would be so kind as to inform us. I see in America a government extending over a country 10 times as large as England and conducted with regularity, but we don't have a king. So what's so great about kings that can't be replicated in just another form of good government, right? Do you guys buy that? Or is it actually better to have like somebody strong in charge who tells everybody what to do? Like, in other words, can democracy work, or are we just kidding ourselves? Like, are we just hardwired to follow strong leaders?
I mean, it's worked pretty well to this point, I'd say. I mean, other than the Civil War in the last 4 years, I would say as a country, we're pretty good at, being united and not needing one voice to guide us.
Yeah.
I would say it's kind of both.
Okay, Nate, yeah, go ahead.
Like, I think we need like a strong ruler, but like, here in America, we'll choose that person, but we'll always gravitate towards someone who seen as strong and has like the ability to lead and all that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anybody else? Is democracy just a sham? Like, are we all just following strong people?
Well, here's one thing I've always heard, that there's with like democracy, it's almost like there's no like a difference between a republic and a democracy. Is with a republic, there are like laws that the republic has to follow. When you all have a democracy, it's free rule. In other words, there's no laws the ruler had to follow, you know what I mean, or, listen to, so they don't extend their power than what is needed.
Yeah, it's a little more complicated than that. But yeah, the idea that we're a nation of laws in the United States, that's something that's talked about a lot. It's like we're a nation of laws. And no matter who the president is, no matter who's in Congress, whatever, these are all revolving doors where people are just placeholders to carry out the laws and to set up new ones. But what's constant is the Constitution, right? That's the thing that's the pillar that holds America together. And it has been for over 200 years. But what happens when leaders start abusing the laws, or ignoring them? You get Watergate, you get impeachment, you get, like Nick talked about the last 4 years. I'm not going to get into that right now.
Yeah, it's probably best.
There are going to be entire books written about how the current president has abused his power and probably been one of the most corrupt presidents in all of American history because of the way that he's either ignored certain laws or changed them, at his will through executive orders to benefit him personally. And so I'm not going to get into that, but what's important is that people abide by the laws. And if you do that over a long term, like Thomas Paine is saying, and what Nate, is gesturing to, that's the thing that matters, right? Is stability. Like, yeah, we all kind of follow popular figures, but in the end, as long as those figures abide by the rules of society, we'll be okay. So it is kind of both, and it's kind of like what John is saying too. We're both a republic and a democracy, but I'm not going to get into that whole thing either.
Yeah, I was thinking, I think one big thing with the French is that they didn't really have a separation of powers. So the National Assembly, right, had so much power, so they were able to control the entire country all by themselves. They had no one to check them and control their power.
Right. Yep. So that was a flaw of the French Revolution. So moving on then to the second document, the Code Napoleon. So in some ways, Burke is right. He doesn't say it in this part of in the book, you only get a small snippet of his railings against the French Revolution. And another part, he says, the revolution in France is bound to fail, and they will come full circle back to a strong man to lead them. And where's that strong man going to come from? The military. That's what Burke's prediction is what happens. Burke dies, by the way, before he gets to see Napoleon come to power, but he basically predicts Napoleon. Now, Napoleon comes to power. He overthrows the French revolutionary government. He sets up a government that is very self-serving, and it's all about Napoleon. But he's also a product of the French Revolution himself. Like, he actually believes in giving people more liberties and rights. He just doesn't want a democracy. He wants everyone to bow down to him, but he wants to use that power to give people more rights and freedoms. And so we get the Code Napoleon, which is his legal system that he sets up. This part of the Code Napoleon in your book is focused on women and women's rights. What kinds of rights are afforded to women according to Napoleon's legal code? Like, what does the law in France say about women under Napoleon?
Let me Google it. Oh, my mic's on.
Let me put it this way.
Didn't he basically, wasn't it like men are like the authority of their families and like women basically are just property of their husbands or fathers.
Yeah, not so much property anymore. Like that's the one little gain that women get is like we acknowledge that women are people, and in the absence of a husband, women can do whatever they want. That's great. But if they're married, yes, absolutely, they are completely subservient to the husband. It starts out fine, right? Like Law 212, the husband and wife mutually owe each other fidelity, succor, and assistance. The husband owes protection to his wife, and the wife obedience to the husband. Okay, all right, now we're getting into some weird, like, sexist transactional territory. The wife is obliged to live with her husband and to follow him wherever he thinks it's proper to. Okay. And then it kind of goes off the rails from there, right? So you see this happen pretty quick, right? As you read through the document, women are, if they are married, they are chained to their husbands. They are bound to him no matter what, right? And there's very little recourse. But there is stuff that, like, they talk about divorce and all that. The husband can demand a divorce from his wife because of accusations of adultery. But so can women, right? So if the guy steps out and cheats, women can also file for divorce. It goes both ways. A woman, like a man just can't divorce his wife without cause. He's got to find her like cheating on him. But also a woman can do that. Like the wife can file for divorce for the same reason. So there's a little bit, like bit by bit, women are starting to carve out more and more fundamental I don't want to say rights, but I guess that's legal benefits, in Western civilization, starting with Napoleon's legal code. What do you think though? Is this a step back for women, or is this like actually like a good thing to have these very marginal, incremental liberties afforded to women?
Well, I bet compared to like the original French monarchy was better, but compared to the revolution, it was a step back. But the revolution was so unstable, I highly doubt they would have lasted. So
Yeah,
I think it's probably it's not even a step forward, more like a shove forward, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. What do the women in the class think about, as you were reading these, this document, ladies, what was your reaction to this? If there's anybody willing to speak. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, so, I guess John said it, like, it's better than what it used to be, but we still have a long way to go when it comes to women's rights. The Code Napoleon is a tiny little baby step in terms of giving, women the right to divorce their husbands, and they can own property and stuff, but they have to jump through a bunch of hoops to get there first.
Mm-hmm.
Later on in the 19th century, in the 1800s, we see slightly more progress in that direction, but things don't really take off until the 1920s. In 1920, we get the 19th Amendment in the United States. It's one of the first Western nations to give women the right to vote in elections. Britain and France come much later in that, or later on in the 20th century. So America is kind of one of the first nations to give women the right to vote. And then that's when you get like second wave feminism. And after that thing, the fight for more and more actual real equality and real stakeholdership in society on the part of women. So, all right. Well, let's call it there, guys. We've gotten a good 30 minutes of discussion, and I'm working on grading your papers. I'm hoping to have those done by the end of the weekend. I'm sorry it's been a bit of a wait for you, but you know, I'm grading for 5 classes, and they all have writing assignments, and it's hard. It's very hard to get through all of them in a timely manner. So next week we'll be talking about the Industrial Revolution. And yeah, I guess that's really all I have to say. We have another writing assignment that's due the end of next Friday. I'll get that up online to you by the end of today. So you'll have a whole week to start working on it.
Okay.
But so far, what I'm seeing from the papers that I've read so far are pretty good. When you go to look at your grade for the first paper, make sure you go into like the detailed notes of it, because I'll be writing like suggestions to you if something is off. I'll be giving you a little note, you know, what to do better for next time. So make sure you read the feedback, so that way you don't repeat the same mistakes throughout the semester, and you know how to correct for it. All right, any questions about anything? All right, well, thanks, guys. I hope you have a good morning, good weekend, and I'll see you guys next week. All right.
Peace.